She entered the bank clad in a gray cardigan paired with a plain white t-shirt. The manager sneered, gesturing toward the exit. "I'm sorry, but we don't serve people like you here." 7 minutes later, a polished black vehicle glided to a stop outside. As the esteemed gentleman with silver hair made his entrance into the bank, the manager's complexion drained of color. She had just refused service to the wife of the billionaire, who now possessed the entire bank. The sleek marble floors of Oakmont Financial Center shimmered in the morning light. Claire Wilson pushed through the heavy glass doors, her simple gray cardigan and white t-shirt standing out against the polished corporate environment surrounding her. At 33, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her brown shoulder-length hair falling naturally around her face. As she approached the waiting area, Claire felt the subtle shift in the room, the quick glances, the raised eyebrows, the silent judgments. She had grown accustomed to it. Her decision to dress modestly, regardless of her resources, was intentional, a personal belief she had upheld long before she met her husband. A young receptionist glanced up, her gaze swiftly assessing Claire's unassuming attire and well-used handbag, before her smile transformed into a facade, lacking authenticity. "Good morning. How may I assist you today?" the receptionist inquired, her tone suggesting that maybe she was unable to. Claire explained that there is a problem with a wire transfer for the Wilson Foundation. It was expected to clear yesterday, yet the funds have not yet arrived at the Children's Hospital in Phoenix. The receptionist's fingers tapped at her keyboard. "I can't find any documentation of a significant transfer associated with the Wilson Foundation." "It's for $850,000, Claire murmured softly. The receptionist raised her eyebrows just a bit. "I understand. For transactions of that scale, it's essential to consult with one of our relationship managers. I'll check to see if Ms. Dawson is free." Her emphasis on magnitude conveyed a distinct sense of doubt. Claire nodded, familiar with the feeling of being overlooked. She settled into the waiting area, observing how other patrons in professional attire were promptly directed to personal bankers without any hesitation. A small group of executives gathered near the management offices, engaged in conversation. Her wayward glances were met with the faintest of smirks, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. Claire concentrated on her phone, examining the email from Phoenix Children's Hospital regarding the urgently required medical equipment that the transfer was intended to acquire. After 20 minutes, as I observed other customers arriving and departing, a tall blonde woman in a flawlessly tailored navy blue suit made her way over. Patricia Dawson's pearl necklace shimmered in the light as she loomed over Claire, neglecting to offer her hand. "I see you have inquiries regarding a foundation transfer." Her tone carried the same disbelief as the receptionist's. Claire stood tall, locking eyes with Patricia in a moment of unwavering connection. "Yes, I'm Claire Wilson with the Wilson Foundation. A transfer is currently awaiting completion." "Excuse me, but could you clarify who granted you the authority to oversee the foundation's finances?" Patricia interrupted, her perfectly manicured hand moving dismissively. "Generally, representatives from foundations possess appropriate identification and schedule appointments." Claire inhaled deeply. "I hold the position of director at the foundation. I founded it 5 years ago." Patricia's gaze sharpened with doubt as she scrutinized Claire from head to toe again. "How about we move over to my desk and explore what this is all about?" Patricia sighed, her expression unmistakably revealing that Claire was consuming precious time. As they strolled across the bank floor, Claire felt the presence of the stairs trailing behind them. Patricia's desk was strategically placed by expansive windows that offered a sweeping view of the financial district. With a wave of her hand, she indicated for Claire to take a seat, her gestures lacking any enthusiasm. "So, Ms. Wilson, Claire provided once more. "Indeed. Let's discuss the transfer you are asking about. Could you please provide the account number?" Patricia inquired, her fingers hovering delicately above the keys of her keyboard. Claire shared the details, and Patricia recorded them, her brow furrowing slightly. "I don't observe any foundation associated with this degree of capitalization under your name," Patricia said after a moment, her tone suggesting Claire might be confused or worse, It seems there may be a misunderstanding regarding the figures at play. I am confident in my assertion. Claire responded with a sense of tranquility. The Wilson Foundation has partnered with Oakmont for 3 years. We have facilitated the transfer of millions through these accounts to support children's medical initiatives. Patricia's eyebrows raised countless questions about this bank. The doubt in her voice was now clear. So, you have the authority to manage these alleged millions? Claire sensed a gentle flush rise to her cheeks, yet she maintained her poise. Indeed, as I previously stated, I hold the position of founder and director. A gentleman in a meticulously crafted suit strolled past, drawing Patricia's attention. She lit up at once, rising to welcome him. Mr. Henderson, it's a pleasure to encounter you today. What was your experience like in the Bahamas? The man ceased to smile widely. Patricia, brilliant as ever. The family thoroughly enjoyed the resort you suggested. I'm absolutely thrilled. Are you planning to make any changes to your portfolio today? Patricia inquired with enthusiasm. Not today, just the usual deposit, he said, casting a curious glance at Claire. Patricia nodded, deliberately choosing not to introduce Claire. I'll be with you shortly, she said, her tone suggesting it wouldn't be much longer. As Henderson walked away, Patricia turned back to Claire, the warmth in her expression evaporating. After a comprehensive review of our records, Ms. Wilson, I can confirm the findings. We have no foundation account with significant balances under your name. Her tone had become more rigid. Could it be that you're uncertain about which bank manages these accounts? Claire picked up her phone, launched her banking app, and angled the screen for Patricia to see. This is our account. The current balance stands at $3.2 million, with a pending transfer amounting to $850,000. Patricia's eyes flicked to the screen, her demeanor transforming from doubt to wariness. These days, anyone can whip up a mock-up of a banking app, she remarked with a hint of disdain. For transactions of this scale, it is essential to have the appropriate documentation, identification, and usually a scheduled meeting with our private banking division. Claire inhaled deeply. I am able to supply any documentation you require. Do you actually hold an account with this bank? Patricia inquired directly. Indeed, as I've mentioned on several occasions, the Wilson Foundation has been partnered with Oakmont for 3 years. Patricia's lips formed a tight line. What led you to take on the role of directing this foundation? The inquiry was steeped in suggestion. Claire knew it at once. This woman believed she was merely an imposter or, at best, a secretary who had crossed her limits. Text, I initially funded it myself, Claire replied, keeping her composure, and have expanded it through partnerships and strategic investments. Patricia reclined, her skepticism evident in her posture. I understand, but could you clarify the origin of these own funds? The question was entirely inappropriate, and they both knew it. Claire sensed her patience beginning to unravel. My financial situation is not pertinent to addressing this transfer issue, Ms. Dawson. Indeed, when an individual enters wearing, Patricia waved her hand dismissively at Claire's ensemble. Indeed, when individuals assert the existence of multimillion-dollar accounts, it becomes highly pertinent. Claire adjusted her posture in the chair. My looks are unrelated to my foundation or its financial status. Ms. Wilson, if that is indeed your name, Patricia remarked, her patience wearing thin. Oakmont Financial upholds a distinguished reputation. We cater to a select group of individuals with considerable financial resources. Individuals overseeing vast sums of money usually do not portray themselves as, once more, she motioned towards Claire's unadorned outfit. Claire had encountered this bias previously, but seldom with such overt clarity. My style is a matter of personal expression, rather than an indication of my economic status. Patricia's smile held a chilling quality. Absolutely. At Oakmont, we take great pride in offering tailored service to our esteemed clients. Familiar clients. Her focus on knowledge made it evident that she felt Claire did not fit into that group. She rose suddenly. I think there has been some confusion. If you wish to delve into foundation matters, I recommend scheduling a formal appointment and ensuring you have the necessary documentation on hand. You might consider visiting our location in the Eastern District. They manage smaller accounts. Claire stayed in her seat. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with your manager, if possible. Patricia's demeanor grew stern. I hold the position of Senior Relationship Manager for this branch, Ms. Wilson, and I have provided you with my professional evaluation. We are unable to assist with transactions of the magnitude you're describing without the necessary documentation and appointment protocols in place. I have the documentation, Claire asserted, rummaging through her bag. Patricia lifted her hand, bringing her to a halt. Unneeded. Regardless, appointments are necessary for our esteemed clients. But I am already a client, Claire asserted, her irritation finally surfacing. A number of nearby customers and bank employees were now observing the interaction with open curiosity. Patricia appeared to suddenly notice the audience, adjusting her already impeccable posture. Ms. Wilson, she declared with a voice that carried, this is evidently not the type of bank for you. I have outlined our protocols which are applicable to all individuals. Now, if you'll pardon me, I have clients with scheduled appointments awaiting my attention. The rejection was clear and undeniable. Patricia waved her hand, its perfectly manicured nails directing attention to the exit with a decisive motion. Claire sensed the heat of embarrassment flooding her cheeks as she collected her bag. All eyes in the bank were drawn to her as Patricia's voice resonated through the room. A community credit union might align more closely with your requirements. Our focus is on serving clients with substantial financial resources. Claire pivoted to meet Patricia's gaze for one final moment. You are making an error. Patricia's smile was icy. I don't think that's the case. If needed, security will escort you out. A security guard hesitated, taking a half step forward, his uncertainty evident. Claire pivoted and strode toward the exit, her chin lifted high in defiance of the searing embarrassment. Upon approaching the glass doors, her ears caught the familiar sound of Patricia's voice once more. Rogers, kindly ensure that our genuine clients are not inconvenienced in this manner again. As Claire stepped into the morning air, the doors closed behind her, and her hand instinctively reached for her phone. If you're finding pleasure in this narrative, be sure to click that subscribe button. Now, let us explore what unfolds next. Within the walls of Oakmont Financial Center, Patricia Dawson approached her desk, a look of contentment gracing her features. A number of colleagues offered her encouraging nods for managing the situation effectively. The bank returned to its usual rhythm, the soft murmur of exclusive dealings and courteous exchanges filling the air once more. Precisely 7 minutes after Claire had left, the glass doors swung open once more. This time, attention was captured instantly, but for a completely different cause. A notable gentleman in his early 50s made his way into the bank. His silver-gray hair was flawlessly styled, and his posture exuded a natural authority. His tailored charcoal suit exuded a quiet elegance, a subtle indication of affluence that required no proclamation. He was joined by 2 men dressed in sharp business attire, exuding the unmistakable confidence of seasoned executives. William Chandler, the bank manager, quickly left his office, striding across the marble floor with his hand outstretched. Mr. Wilson, what a delightful surprise. We didn't anticipate your arrival until the formal introduction scheduled for tomorrow. His voice resonated throughout the now silent bank floor. Robert Wilson offered a firm yet succinct handshake. His demeanor was amiable yet enigmatic. I chose to arrive early, to sense the atmosphere, he responded, his resonant voice exuding an innate command. My wife said she would be coming in this morning to address a matter regarding our foundation's transfer. Chandler's smile wavered just a bit. Is that your wife, sir? Indeed, Claire Wilson. Robert indicated with his hand, showing a height of about this tall. Today, I have brown hair and I'm dressed in a gray cardigan. Has she stopped by? A palpable wave of discomfort coursed through the bank. Patricia, observing from her desk, froze in place, her complexion fading to a ghostly hue. I am uncertain whether Chandler stammered. Text, I believe I assisted a woman by that name earlier, Patricia said, approaching the group with a polished smile that fell short of genuine warmth. though she refrained from mentioning any link to you, Mr. Wilson. Robert's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. She simply wouldn't. Claire chooses to manage foundation matters based on her own abilities. He glanced at one of the executives next to him. David, could you reach out to Claire and invite her to join us? It appears we have some topics to delve into. Patricia's smile grew more and more forced. It seems there might have been a small mix-up, Mr. Wilson. The woman who entered lacked the necessary identification for the accounts she was attempting to access. Intriguing, Robert responded, his voice steady. Given that my wife established the Wilson Foundation 5 years ago and has served as its executive director since, the very foundation that now manages over $3 million in accounts at this bank, Chandler cast a startled glance at Patricia. I believe there may have been some misunderstanding, Mr. Wilson. Patricia stands out as one of our most dedicated relationship managers. Is she? Robert inquired, his eyes now locked onto Patricia. Could you please clarify, Ms. Dawson, the nature of your assistance to my wife earlier today? Once again, the glass doors swung open, and Claire stepped inside. The difference between her unassuming look and her husband's commanding demeanor was notable, yet both exuded a shared sense of understated assurance. She offered a slight smile in recognition of Robert. She merely nodded at the others, providing no salutation. The bank was enveloped in an eerie silence. All eyes were fixed on the unfolding scene, with a mix of dawning recognition and horror evident on the faces of both employees and customers. Claire, Robert replied with a friendly tone. I was inquiring with Ms. Dawson about the assistance she provided you this morning regarding the foundation transfer. Patricia's face was now devoid of all color. Mrs. Wilson, it seems there has been a mix-up. Did you bring up your connection? What about my connection? Claire inquired, her tone steady. Are you referring to my established account at this bank, or maybe the foundation I ran for 5 years? Which connection would have warranted professional service, Ms. Dawson? Robert glanced back and forth, his face tightening as realization set in. Claire, did you experience a refusal of service at this bank? Before Claire had the chance to respond, Patricia interrupted with urgency. Indeed, Mr. Wilson, that is not the case. I merely proposed that appropriate procedures be adhered to for transactions of such significance. You're aware of the security protocols, I see. What I gather, Robert remarked, his tone unsettlingly calm, is that my wife, who oversees a multimillion-dollar charitable foundation, was seemingly evaluated based on her looks instead of her financial qualifications. Chandler moved ahead, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Mr. Wilson, please allow me to apologize profusely for any misunderstanding. Had we been aware? What did you know? Robert cut in. That she was my partner for life? That's precisely the essence, isn't it? It is essential for your team to extend basic respect and professionalism to everyone, regardless of their connections. The stillness in the bank was overwhelming now. Patricia appeared on the verge of losing consciousness. Maybe, Claire proposed softly, we ought to talk about this alone. Robert gave a nod, then shifted his attention to Chandler. Could you direct me to your office, please? I would appreciate it if Ms. Dawson could be part of our gathering. His tone unmistakably conveyed that this was not a request. As they approached the manager's office, the murmurs started, cascading through the bank with an intensity that was almost palpable. The woman in the unadorned cardigan was far from an ordinary client. Claire Wilson, the wife of billionaire tech innovator Robert Wilson, had recently seen her husband acquire a controlling interest in the parent company of Oakmont Financial. Patricia Dawson had just made a very public suggestion that she didn't belong there. Within the confines of the manager's office, Chandler, with a hint of anxiety, extended an invitation for Robert and Claire to take a seat. As Patricia remained stiffly positioned by the door, her composed demeanor crumbled. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, I find it difficult to convey the profound way in which Chandler commenced. Robert lifted his hand, bringing silence to the room. Before we proceed, I would appreciate it if you could share the details of what transpired this morning. Is that you, Claire? Claire recounted her interaction with Patricia with a serene demeanor, carefully detailing every aspect. The prolonged delay as other patrons were attended to without hesitation. The doubt surrounding her identity. The condescending approach regarding the foundation. Ultimately, the overt recommendation that she seek out a bank more aligned with her needs. As she concluded, an eerie hush enveloped the room. Chandler appeared to be in a state of distress. Patricia gazed down at the floor, her eyes avoiding the gaze of those around her. "Ms. Dawson," Robert finally spoke, his tone steady yet frosty. "Is this a true representation of what happened?" Patricia took a deep breath. "I might have been a bit straightforward in outlining our protocols, yet that wasn't the point of my inquiry." Robert cut in. "Did you suggest to my wife that this bank was not suitable for her and advise her to leave?" Patricia's shoulders drooped. "Absolutely, sir. Yet, I found myself completely unaware of her identity. So, is that what makes it okay?" Claire inquired softly. "Absolutely not, Mrs. Wilson." Chandler interrupted. "It was utterly unacceptable, no matter the circumstances. Yet it occurred," Robert observed, "in a bank that I now essentially possess, a bank that I was promised upholds the utmost standards of customer service." Chandler gently pressed a handkerchief to his forehead. "Mr. Wilson, I want to emphasize that this singular occurrence does not represent our principles or usual level of service." "Does it not?" Claire inquired, her tone remaining steady, "as I noticed at least 3 other simply attired patrons receiving the same lack of attention from your employees while I waited. The sole distinction lay in their quiet acceptance." Chandler's lips parted and shut in silence. Robert stated, standing tall, that the transfer from the Wilson Foundation to Phoenix Children's Hospital would be finalized without delay, with all fees waived as a formal apology for the hold-up. "Absolutely, sir." Chandler nodded in agreement without hesitation. "Secondly, Ms. Dawson, your position at this bank is hereby terminated, effective immediately." Patricia's head jerked up, her eyes filled with astonishment. "Mr. Wilson, if you would be so kind. I have spent 15 years with Oakmont. My record stands out as exceptional." "Your record," Robert stated with a chill, "reveals a pattern of discriminating against customers based on their appearance and publicly humiliating the director of a significant foundation client. That doesn't seem particularly commendable." "I have a mortgage, a family," Patricia pleaded. Her previous arrogance vanished entirely. Claire, still in her seat, glanced at her husband before turning her gaze back to Patricia. "The irony, Ms. Dawson, is that my purpose for being here today extends beyond the transfer. I aim to discuss the Foundation's new initiative focused on delivering financial education and affordable banking services to underserved communities." Patricia's expression twisted in anguish as the weight of her choices started to dawn on her. "Third," Robert went on, glancing at Chandler, "I request a comprehensive evaluation of customer service practices at this branch, accompanied by an in-depth assessment of your training procedures." "Absolutely, sir. I will ensure it takes precedence." Chandler nodded with enthusiasm. "You're not grasping the situation," Robert remarked. "You will not be leading it. Your involvement will be essential as we assess your leadership of this branch. An independent firm with expertise in financial inclusion practices will carry out the audit." Chandler's face drained of color, yet he gave a silent nod. At last, Robert faced Patricia once more. "Today you will be clearing out your desk with guidance. Your last paycheck and severance, which is quite generous, will depend on your agreement to sign a non-disclosure agreement. This incident and any matters concerning the Wilsons are not to be discussed with anyone." Patricia nodded silently, her eyes brimming with tears. At last, Claire rose to her feet. "For what it's worth, Ms. Dawson, I derive no satisfaction from this result. I arrived here as a client in search of the service I was rightfully due." As they got ready to exit the office, Robert hesitated at the threshold. "Mr. Chandler, please gather the remaining staff in the main area within 5 minutes. Before we depart, I would like to share a few thoughts with all of you." The atmosphere in the bank was thick with unease as employees assembled, observing Patricia methodically empty her desk, her movements stiff and her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Patrons remained, attuned to the emerging narrative. As Robert and Claire stepped out of the manager's office, an eerie silence enveloped the crowd. Robert's voice resonated effortlessly throughout the marble-floored expanse. Greetings of the day. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Robert Wilson, the newly appointed majority shareholder of Oakmont Financial Group. This is certainly not the way I envisioned making my introduction. He halted, his eyes scanning the gathered expressions. Today, my wife Claire, the founder and director of the Wilson Foundation, a client of this bank for 3 years, was denied service solely based on her appearance. She faced public humiliation and was instructed to vacate the premises. Whispers flowed among the gathering. Allow me to clarify without any ambiguity. This behavior is completely unacceptable and will not be permitted in the future. The mission of this institution is to cater to clients from diverse backgrounds with unwavering respect and professionalism. Claire stood beside him, her unadorned outfit now resonating with a deeper significance for the observing crowd. In the weeks ahead, this branch will experience notable transformations in its leadership, policies, and overall culture. Individuals who are unable to embrace a more inclusive approach to banking will find it challenging to stay with the organization. His words lingered, their effect undeniable. Assess individuals based on the substance of their narratives, not the contents of their wardrobes. That will suffice. 3 months later, Claire parked her unassuming sedan outside Oakmont Financial Center, which had now taken on the name Wilson Community Bank. The exterior of the building appeared familiar, yet the transformations within were strikingly evident. Upon entering, she observed the fresh signage, promising a pathway for every adventure. The interior was transformed, maintaining its elegance while becoming more inviting, featuring cozy seating areas and straightforward information about available services without any minimum balance requirements. David Chun, the newly appointed branch manager from a community development bank in Chicago, welcomed her with a friendly demeanor. Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. The team stands prepared for the presentation at your convenience. Claire beamed. Thanks, David. And please, it's still simply Claire. In the primary conference room, 20 bank employees, a mix of recognizable faces and newcomers, sat in eager anticipation. A sizable screen showcased the Wilson Foundation logo next to the bank's fresh emblem. Thank you all for joining us, Claire started, her tone assured yet friendly. Today signifies the official debut of our Financial Inclusion Initiative, a collaboration between the Wilson Foundation and Wilson Community Bank. She moved to the first slide, which displayed statistical data regarding unbanked and underbanked populations. For countless individuals, conventional banking appears out of reach, daunting, or merely not tailored to their requirements. Our initiative seeks to transform that perception and reality through 3 essential programs. As Claire detailed the initiatives, complimentary financial literacy workshops, no-cost checking accounts with no minimum balance, and microloans for small businesses serving underserved entrepreneurs. She observed the authentic interest from the staff. These expressions were no longer the same dismissive ones she had faced 3 months prior. Are there any questions? She inquired after wrapping up the presentation. A young banker lifted her hand. Mrs. Wilson, Claire, how do you address competitors who claim these services lack the profitability needed for sustainability? Claire beamed with delight. Banking goes beyond merely focusing on profit from a select group of affluent clients. It's about fostering enduring connections with a diverse range of clients throughout the economic landscape. The initial findings indicate a stronger than anticipated retention of accounts and a sense of community goodwill, both of which contribute to tangible business growth. Following the meeting, Claire made her way across the main floor, taking note of the exchanges between staff and customers. A woman dressed in a housekeeper's uniform received help as she opened her first checking account, while a teenager in casual attire explored the student savings program. The bank buzzed with a fresh vitality, intentional, welcoming, and friendly. In the parking lot, Claire encountered Robert, who was arriving for his own meeting. How did it go? He inquired, strolling beside her. Truly impressive. The team is truly welcoming the transformations. Claire cast a fleeting look over her shoulder at the structure. It barely resembles what it was back then. Robert gave a slight nod. Occasionally, the most profound insights arise from the most surprising sources. Who could have imagined that a single dreadful customer service encounter would inspire a complete overhaul of the banking model? Claire beamed. I have always held the conviction that banking can embody both profitability and empathy. We are demonstrating it now. Upon arriving at the entrance, a woman emerged from the bank. She was middle-aged, dressed modestly, and wore an expression of relief. She offered a timid nod as she walked by. She spoke softly, recounting her first experience. For the first time, a bank treated me with respect. Once she departed, Robert and Claire shared a glance filled with unspoken contentment. That, Claire said, makes everything worthwhile. Robert tightened his grip on her hand. It's interesting to consider how many would have seized that moment 3 months back for retribution. It was utilized for transformation. Claire gave a subtle shrug. The most effective form of retribution isn't about shaming someone in front of others. It's about crafting something that surpasses what existed prior. Upon entering their bank, the security guard welcomed them with a warm smile, disregarding their clothing and acknowledging them as individuals. Neither of them overlooked the quiet grace of the moment. Ultimately, it transcended the notions of wealth or power. It centered on dignity and ultimately establishing a financial establishment where casual attire was treated with the same regard as formal wear. Have you ever faced judgment based on your appearance in a professional setting? Or maybe you observed another individual facing mistreatment due to their appearance. We invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. If this tale of retribution and change resonated with you, be sure to tap that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on our next video. And keep in mind, at times the most influential individuals are those who don't feel the need to display their power. Until we meet again in our next tale, where another impactful lesson is on the horizon.